We cannot sustain the collapse of Germany. That's absolutely 100% obvious. That would be an utter bloody catastrophe.
If Germany collapses, EU's gone, right? For a while, right? The man behind the curtain is the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Of course, we're going to have to deal with China, but at this rate, look, if Germany falls from these energy issues, which is looking pretty likely at this point, China is going to peel off the rock too, right? As are we, economically, right?
Well, Australia won't build coal-generating electrical plants, but they'll ship their bloody coal to China, where they're going to build much dirtier plants. And the same thing applies to Canada. If we shut down our energy industry, which our bloody, insane, narcissistic, delusional, traitorous prime minister happens to think is a good idea and seems to be working as hard as he can to manage, all that's going to happen is that we're going to cede the ground to people like Putin, who we also turned into a radical enemy with his hands on the control pump for Europe. I mean, I don't see how we could be stupider here in the West if we actually took courses in stupidity and tried as hard as we could. We seem to be doing everything we can to break everything as rapidly as possible. And then I wonder too, has it got to the point where the people who think, that you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, and there's too many people on the planet, think that this is some sort of like needle's eye that we have to go through, all this mass starvation and death, so that we end up with a sustainable population? I mean, Jesus Christ, that's a dim and grim scenario. But as you said, why would you take the Dutch farmers out of business when they're so unbelievably hyper-productive and efficient? It's not like there's too much food, especially not if we don't have farmers. If you lose the farmers for one generation, you lose all that knowledge. And I saw the government said, well, some of these farmers are just going to have to move. It's like, what are they going to do? They're going to move their farm. How are you going to do that? You can't move a farm. And it's not like these things are just, transferable, fungible in this simplistic manner. And so, yeah, it's such a form of insanity, and it's all justified by the fact that these half-wit globalists are claiming constantly to be moral because they're saving the planet. And I know this literature. I know the planet-saving literature, let's say, because I studied it for about 4 years and in some depth, and I think I found the world's thinkers who thought this through properly, and that would be Matt Ridley and Bjorn Lomborg and Marian Tupy, most particularly. And all three of them, and I would put Bjorn Lomborg at the top of that list, those thinkers knew something fundamental and something so bloody optimistic that I couldn't believe it was true when I first encountered it, which was that if we really want to reach a kind of sustainable harmony with the planet, the best way to do that, absolutely obviously, is to distribute autonomous free market systems as widely as possible, and then to get people everywhere in the world as rich as we can, as fast as we can. Because the biggest contributor to environmental degradation isn't industrial development. It isn't the efficiency of the Dutch farmers. It's absolute bloody poverty and privation, and the probability that people at the bottom of the economic distribution are going to fall into these catastrophic positive feedback loops that you described and devastate and lay waste to everything. As soon as you make people rich, the data on this are crystal clear. As soon as you get people up to about $5,000 a year in gross domestic product, they start caring about the environment locally and autonomously. And so, we're in a situation right now where if our leaders weren't so concerned with scoring cheap reputation points and being hyper-moral in their ignorance and pretentious in their global ambitions, we could be working towards a world where everybody had enough food and enough education and were simultaneously inspired on their own account to engage in the kind of environmental stewardship that would leave a good planet for their children and their grandchildren. We could have our cake and eat it too, And yet what we're doing is we're breaking the supply chains and dooming the poor and fostering what's going to be a mass migration into Europe. And that's just going to be a bloody catastrophe. And I hate to see this, and I hope I'm wrong and I'm just being paranoid, but I don't think so.
I don't think you're being paranoid. I spend most of my time downrange. I spend a lot of time in places like China, India, just good Lord. I mean, when you land in China, sometimes I wonder if my airplane's going to make it through the smog or we're going to get stuck like amber in the smog. It's so thick sometimes you can't see the ground. It's unbelievable. And likewise with India, right? I spent almost a year in India and another year in Nepal, right? In Thailand, where I have an office, sometimes you have to have air filters in every room, and because all of Asia's, not all of Asia, but most of Asia's burning their farmland every year. You can see it in satellite photo. Look it up. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I mean, this pollution that comes from poverty is quite intense. Not that China is poor and rich, and India obviously is increasingly wealthy, but they have huge amounts of impoverished people, and their factories still actually are behaving as if they're poor. They're dumping smog out, unfiltered. It's unbelievable. And anyway, we could go on about that forever. But the bottom line is the farmers are clearly under attack here in Netherlands. The German farmers also are very efficient. Again, I lived 4 years in Germany, and their farmers are also under attack, and so all across Europe.